So full moon was
I didn't realize you think so low of me.
a lot. After months of messing around, Stolitz finally found out. With 30 years of bad coping mechanisms rearing their ugly heads, with Stolitz and Blitz realizing just how deep the hole they've dug themselves into, as there has never been a miscommunication they didn't go with, and not a grain of conflict resolution in either of their heads. Meaning that full moon, Stolitz's proposal to end the contractual nature of their relationship and open up to something more genuine, was probably always going to end in a disaster. However, the more I broke down what happened that night, despite both of them making mistakes deeply tied to who they are, by the time my thoughts settled on what had happened, the more I realized that Stolitz couldn't have set himself up more to fail if he had tried. Now, to clarify, I'm not saying that Stolitz's feelings or actions aren't valid. However, for him to get what he wanted, to give Blitz the choice to choose him, Stolitz screwed himself over so hard. From how he started the convo, how he chose to have it, to the simple fact that for as much as he talks about the power imbalance between them and how wrong it was, it becomes obvious when you look at his actions that he's never really unpacked what that means or changed his behavior. Stolitz is a nice guy, but the series seems to be set on making him finally realize that there is a disconnect between what he thinks versus how his actions actually affect those around him. This is just gonna be my analysis of how Stolitz got himself into this mess, where things went wrong, and just my strong disagreement with some of the excuses used to defend how things played out that night as it pertains to Stolitz. Things are gonna get worse before they get better, so let's break down this ship.
First instinct is that it's always about sex.
Just gonna roll tape.
Favors for favors.
Doesn't that sound enticing?
So I feel like if you're watching this video, you already know who these characters are, so I'm just gonna skip the character introductions. If not, I have so many videos, just pick one and you'll get the idea. But we gotta start this analysis of choice paralysis with just how they got here in the first place, and how, yes, Stolitz made things about sex. And if you disagree with that assessment, okay, but just know you're not disagreeing with me, you're disagreeing with Vivian Medrano, the woman who wrote the show. Now, the way things got to be so much about sex starts with the first time these two met as adults. Stolitz and Blitz had previously met as kids. Blitz was bought by Stolitz's father to be his son's playmate for the day, something that Stolitz probably didn't know and has never figured out. With this single instance just setting the tone for their entire relationship as adults, where Stolitz, sweet boy that he is also constantly unaware of the power and social differences between them. That Blitz as an imp is just one step above hellhounds, who are people that get treated as actual fucking dogs. Imps are near the bottom of hell's hierarchy, as they are used as servants or even accessories to hell's upper crust. Like there's a purse imp in the Got Money cafe. Imps are relegated to the bottom of society, getting the worst jobs, fewer opportunities, and the constant sense that they are worth less than those around them. Meanwhile, Stolitz, as a Goetia, was born into privilege, even if that privilege had some nasty terms and conditions attached, namely Stella.
Want to fuck this one too?
No, of course not.
Stolitz as a noble was forced into an arranged marriage despite him being gay, with him then having to deal with years of mockery and cruelty in his own words. The man got screwed by life, but he was still a Goetia. He got to live in the cold lap of luxury with servants, armies, and vast magical powers, just the works, which we'll get into how Stolitz treats his servants and imps in general, but despite living in a gilded cage and not fucking with the rest of Goetias as far as we can tell, he still didn't seem to grasp just how much power and authority he had over his social lessers. This lack of awareness led to Stolitz having just classist tendencies and worldviews that he just still hasn't really recognized and unlearned. But the big one we really need to focus on is that Stolitz sees everyone he talks to as just people. He still is in fact socially their better. He was born near the top of the hierarchy. He still holds great power over others, but it's almost invisible to him as he's just so used to it. Meanwhile, Blitz, who was born near the bottom, is constantly reminded of his low status and developed a hard combative personality to just survive. Blitz was socially conditioned to expect everything having a cost. It's a dog-eat-dog world, while Stolitz, despite his own troubled household, was sheltered enough to let more romantic ideas just take hold of his mind. This is the differing worldviews that led to their first meeting turning out the way that it did. Blitz remembered that Stolitz had a book that could create portals to the human world, so he broke into Stolitz's house to steal it, only for him to get caught by security, with Stolitz gushing when he sees Blitz again. Now, from Blitz's POV, he's fucked. He just got caught breaking into a rich person's house. They could do God knows what with him, only for Stolitz to not really recognize just how precarious Blitz's situation, and is also overestimating his own connection to Blitz, as to him, Blitz was his first ever friend. But to Blitz, he was just some rich kid he hung out with once and robbed. When they're alone, Stolitz, being the romantic dramatic that he is, when they're alone, starts off with a joke.
You were here to ravish me, weren't you? You?
And this, friends, is a thing that gets the sexy ball rolling, as Stolitz wasn't serious. He was excited to see Blitz again, was miserable in his marriage with Stella, but his opening line only makes sense to him. Blitz was missing the context, so he doesn't know how to really take other than, oh, I think this guy's into me. So when Blitz clocks the book behind him, he decides to lean into that supposed attraction. When really, that was just a joke Stolitz was making to give Blitz an excuse for why he was caught breaking into his room. Stolitz didn't actually care about why he was here, but he was still crushing. So he was more than okay with having some fun flirty banter with Blitz, who was flirting back hard. Then Stolitz kind of laughs it off and starts like Jay asking, hey, how have you been? Only for Blitz, whose eye is on the prize, keep aggressively flirting to distract the owl from the fact that he is trying to steal this book. Then shenanigans lead him to keep escalating things as he tosses Stolitz to the bed and bites him so hard he comes, with Stolitz giving enthusiastic consent.
Fuck! Wow.
Blitz just won the book. Stolitz thought Blitz was initiating. Then Blitz actually took him to Pound Town just out of pity.
All right, fine. I can do this real fast.
This was their first meeting as adults, and it was a communication nightmare, as Stolitz was left under the false impression that Blitz was there for him. We don't know what his reaction was to realizing that the book was missing, but they apparently talked to each other in bed or some point afterwards, as Stolitz brings up letting Blitz borrow it just in episode 1. As yeah, the sex was that good. But more importantly, Blitz brought excitement and passion to a life that had left Stolitz just so dead inside. There was no status quid pro quo here yet, but in Stolitz's mind, this was amazing and I gotta do it again. Now it could be said that Blitz seducing Stolitz is the thing that initiates the heavily sexual nature of their relationship. You could also lean towards the idea that while unintentional, Stolitz's joke got the ball rolling. But I think everything that happened here is kind of just a wash morally. Nobody's the bad guy. No one here in general is the bad guy. They are just two messes who just happened to clash, and results, they did happen. Stolitz also wasn't drunk on absence when it happened. He was just blushing from his crush being here, and he was also horny. Blitz did use Stolitz to get the book. Stolitz didn't really give a damn about the thing. In fact, when he woke up, the only thing he really cared about was flexing on his wife in a moment of post-nut triumph that he revolted against Stella's tyranny. The real issue becomes, and the thing that truly sets a tone for the messed up dynamic that they have, is the deal.
Followed by a night of passionate fornication.
Stolitz calls Blitz up a little transaction going forward. He doesn't call and say, hey, we should do that thing again or get coffee. Far as we know, they don't really talk and say, hey, we should just meet up and talk about what happened. Stolitz, as far as we can tell, just jumped straight from sex to letting Blitz keep the book for a bit to calling Blitz when he was getting shot at to work out a deal. Blitz is running for his life. He is under duress with Stolitz watching and at the bare minimum knows that he's injured. This is one of those things that the more you think about, the worse Stolitz looks and just how he handled it and how he truly has all the power in this relationship. Blitz is literally fighting for his life with one more hole in him than usual, running through the woods. But this, out of all times when Stolitz decides to call Blitz to talk about just what things are going to be like moving forward, while he is lounging in his bath watching through bubbles and using a pet name that implies ownership, and really Stolitz has a problem with fetishizing Blitz. We'll get into Stolitz's social inexperience in a hot second, but I don't think I should have to explain why this is a weird, bad thing to do. Stolitz called Blitz in a time where he couldn't actually talk or process what he's agreeing to, but the situation is kind of indicative of just the very real power imbalance between them. Blitz needs Stolitz's book to go to the human world to carry out the petty revenge hits that he's built his business around. If he doesn't have this, he loses everything. And as an imp, the fact that he owns his own killing business is viewed as an exception. He is the first. This isn't the norm, and to keep it going, he needs that book, and he will do anything to keep it. Blitz also has no leverage. He has nothing to trade other than access to his body. He isn't in any position to haggle, and he's lucky that Stolitz is only asking for once a month intercourse. But if he had asked for once a week, it feels like there's very little Blitz could meaningfully do to protest this other than saying this is unreasonable. All Stolitz having to say in return is no deal. He has all the cards, and there's very little Blitz can do. The exchange they made was all Stolitz's idea, and based on his desires for physical intimacy with Blitz. He finally felt like he was alive for the first time in his life, but even though it was based on a wrong first impression, if he wants to blame anyone for the clusterfuck that is the transactional relationship he's found himself trapped in, well, it's just him. He set the terms. He could have had a convo after that first meeting of what the hell was that. Blitz could have told him it was pity, but he's getting shot at while Stolitz is chilling at home setting terms. So when he's bemoaning how Blitz only thinks this is about sex, it's like, bro, I'm sorry, but this is on you.
Sound fair, my little imp?
This situation is an early example of just how Stoltz's naivete about what he and Blitz are, that they're equals, is secretly screwing him over. The fact that he thinks so highly of Blitz, while a sweet sentiment, creates problems for their relationship. As while Stoltz truly believes this, it blinds him to how his actions and words affect Blitz. Stoltz thinks Blitz is amazing. He could handle these hillbillies, so Blitz should be fine. And therefore, it's cool to have this call, playing off Blitz when he says that this isn't a good time, then going on with what he wants to talk about. Stoltz views them as equals, but he fails to realize just how precarious Blitz's situation is, both in this moment and in general. His beliefs that they are equal, plus being raised in wealth, means that he's never realized just how demeaning he could be towards Blitz, calling Blitz his little imp despite Blitz's protests, aggressively flirting with Blitz even when he's working despite Blitz's protests, using a cutesy but patronizing nickname despite Blitz's protests. And that's not even getting to just how much Stoltz fetishizes Blitz for being an imp, and just will not drop it no matter how much Blitz tells him to drop it. Pre-Aussie STOLAS, when it came to Blitz, was on cloud 9. It was a whole new chapter in his life. Blitz was his escape from his imploding marriage to Stella, his responsibilities as a Goetia. But his habit of getting caught up in his emotions meant that he failed to listen to Blitz's complaints, reinforcing the idea to Blitz that Stoltz only sees him as a plaything. All the while, Stoltz is genuinely in love with the guy, but he just doesn't know how to act.
You are so cute when you are serious.
I'm literally gonna be sick.
Stolitz has never been in a real relationship. As far as we can tell, he's never made any real friends. He was forcibly married to Stella when he was like around 20, so his social skills are kind of shit. Everything he knows about dating has probably been acquired through media, with him trying to replicate the extremely flirty energy of Blitz when he was literally just trying to seduce him. He is also just a black hole of horny, so that's also a thing to consider when this deal started. But while I understand Stolitz's situation and the lack of emotional intelligence in that regard, ignorance is an explanation, not an excuse. Like Stoltz emotionally neglecting his daughter when he dragged her to Lululand so that he could avoid dealing with Stella, or that other time he didn't listen to his daughter when he was dealing with Stella. Stoltz is a sweet guy, but he also has a pattern across all of his appearances on screen that display a failure on his part to listen to what other people are telling him, resulting in his actions negatively affecting those around him. Then, even when he recognizes something is wrong, we still see him slip into those same bad habits of not listening to others, as when he's getting wrapped up in his own emotions, he's too much in his own head to notice. Stolitz is sympathetic, and we understand just his upbringing and how he ended up like this, but that doesn't absolve him of his actions when they negatively affect others. Octavia is the easy example of this, as yeah, that's his daughter, but Blitz is getting the short end of that same stick, and it's only at Aussie does Stoltz finally realize that Blitz might not be into him, or what they have is weird.
You know what? This was a mistake. All right, let's just leave.
It was at this moment that he knew. He fucked up.
Aussie is pretty much the moment any illusion of what was going on just crumbled for everyone. And no one here really deserves to take the fall. Like truly, this is one of those situations where you can just see how everyone reacted and understand why they did it. But I can't really fault any of them, as they just pretty much got jumped by Aussie and Fizz. Blitz got called out for his troubled love life and history of treating his partners poorly. Meanwhile, Stolitz got put on the spot by Asmodeus for choosing to bang Blitz at the expense of his apparent home life, hiding his face in shame for his own actions and being unable to say anything in response. He doesn't defend his own choices, nor does he defend Blitz. So Blitz, being the self-hating imp that he is, who believes that after a lifetime of being raised by a shitty dad who only cared about what his son could do for him, after accidentally causing the fire that maimed his friend, cost his family at circus, scarred himself, and killed his mother, the man who convinced himself that no one could ever love him as he thinks there's nothing to love, takes Stolitz hiding his face as a sign that there's something wrong with him, which gutted Blitz, as for all of his complaining about Stolitz, for all the problematic elements of their relationship, he secretly did like him. Maybe part of this is just Blitz longing to be loved, maybe in a world of being rejected by others, having an overbearing and excessive partner was something he secretly fantasized about. But even in his own fantasy, he still imagined himself serving and being chained to Stolitz, which is both a representation of Blitz fearing love and the actual imbalance in the relationship that he very much is aware of. Blitz never vocalized his feelings because he would rather live and die miserable and alone than be vulnerable for 2 seconds. Blitz has rarely heard a reason that he sucks and didn't secretly agree with it, whether it was true or not. So Stolitz hiding his face is the kind of thing that Blitz would take personally and hard. As in a lifetime of people using or pushing him away, he adapted to this by trying to be the one to push others first. So for him, this was the worst thing that could have happened, hence why afterwards when Stoltz tried to reach out, he tried to talk about what happened, Blitz pushes him away, and one of them gets left outside of Stolitz's house. And if this is starting to sound familiar, well, it's because Aussies and Full Moon play out almost exactly the same.
They're the same picture.
We have a date where the inviter brings the invited under false pretenses. The invited is excited, seeing it as a move towards the direction that they want to go in, only for things to not be that. With an incident happening where the invited doesn't have the immediate reaction that the inviter wanted or was hoping for, with that reaction being more of a product of their own bad coping mechanisms rather than an actual reflection of their true feelings. But damage is done, with the inviter getting angry, shutting the other person out as attempts are made by the other to rectify or talk about what just happened, with the inviter crying themselves asleep that night as nothing went how they thought it would. Aussies and full moon are designed to parallel each other in what happens and how things end, serving as a new low for a couple that was avoiding the elephant in the room or refusing to actually communicate and discuss what just happened. However, while meant to mirror each other, I think the context and intentions of the inviter radically changes the natures of these events and how I personally perceive them. As well as Aussies, they both fucked up and took L's, but you understand why. In Full Moon, they both fucked up, but that L primarily is going to Stolitz, as he intentionally created this situation.
Set us free. How perfect it could be when I see him tonight.
See, Stolitz post-Aussies, post having the reality of Stolitz finally hit him, that Blitz isn't just madly in love with him and just likes to play coy and rough and have fun mocking banter. No, the idea and possibility finally entered Stolitz's head that he might have forced Blitz into this, that Blitz isn't smiling in any of their photos together, and that Stolitz never noticed. The realization hits him that Blitz might actually be miserable and his complaints were actual complaints, not whatever he thought they were. This breaks Stolitz's heart. He decides he can't keep going on like this. He's been taking this situation and this imbalance for granted. Stolitz wants to make this into an actual relationship, not force Blitz to bang him for a book that his livelihood depends on. Stolitz stands up to his shitty wife, announces the divorce is happening, and from there he starts planning Full Moon, for him to give Blitz an Osmodian crystal, which will allow Blitz to teleport on his own regardless of whether he has the book or not, with the idea being that if Stolitz gives Blitz this crystal, it'll nullify the contract between them, allowing Blitz to actually choose if he wants to keep seeing Stolitz or not. But it's not actually what he does first. No, instead he starts putting out a lot of feelers. He wants to put it all on the line. This is Stolitz's plan, but it's not actually what he does first. Essentially, while Stolitz is jumping through hoops of his divorce, trying not to get murdered, and reaching out to his fellow rich people about getting him this crystal, this ship is pretty much trapped in stasis. Blitz is refusing to really talk about what happened, having convinced himself that sleeping together is all they'll ever be. With Stolitz, he's trying to open things up, to dial back and to be something a little bit more normal. The only problem is that he kinda sucks at communicating.
No shit.
Blitz isn't making the situation easier. I think people give Stolitz a little bit too much credit when they say he's trying to change the relationship, as when you look at his actual texts, you can see the issue immediately. Deniability. Doesn't matter if he's asking Blitz if he wants to talk about Aussies or talking about how they should meet up this month. Stolitz constantly is tiptoeing around saying we need to talk, and said it's essentially him praying and hoping that Blitz will reach out to him. If you don't feel like coming, that's okay. If you're not up for it, that's fine, no pressure. You can always drop the book off. But I would like to see you, ... This is painful. Effectively, Stolitz has gone from making demands but effectively communicating his desires to the other end of the extreme where he is being as polite but passive as possible. Stolitz wants to see Blitz, but he always bakes every meetup with a built-in out for Blitz to take, which, while nice, this also carries with its own set of issues, as Stolitz wants Blitz to choose him. This is like that one friend who wants to date another friend but can't say it outright out of fear of ruining the relationship, so he curbs himself, suggests, oh, we should hang out. So the other person is left in this weird place where they can either make the situation clear, say, okay, it's a date, it's a hangout, or take the out that's given. Stolitz is trying, but it's tepid and leaves them in this awkward place of spinning their wheels. Blitz is acting like nothing happened, completely denying reality and denying the signs that Stolitz cares about him for more than just his body.
Laugh at my jokes.
Oh, well that's definitely your clue right there that it's all bullshit.
I know, right?
However, while Blitz isn't helping the situation, I also don't really hold him to the same standards I do Stolitz, as Blitz isn't trying to change the relationship. Blitz is a self-hating hell fiend who craves love. His obsessive stalking and creepy behavior around the M&Ms reflect how Stolitz initially treated him, but those are two separate issues entirely, and one does not justify or excuse the other. But Blitz, for all his bullshit, has always been clear about his boundaries and expectations for their relationship. He fucking is in love with Stolitz, but he's never publicly acted on those feelings. After seeing Stolitz hide his face, to him, that was the confirmation that they'll never be anything more than just a transaction. That was Blitz's takeaway, with the evidence that the show has shown us of them interacting only really validating that being Blitz's take. Stolitz is the one who, after their first hookup set the parameters of what their relationship was gonna be, Blitz complained but rolled the punches of Stolitz' casual classism that irritated him to no end, and just was content to be miserable. Blitz isn't helping shit. He does use Stolitz to get into a club, but in the favors for favors nature of their relationship, at least that still tracked and was within expectations. With Blitz's biggest crime being his willingness to use Stolitz's attraction to him to get what he wants, which is the basis for this entire deal. None of this is good. Morally, everything here is terrible. But in a world where Stolitz explicitly outlined their relationship as favors for favors, Blitz's crime then is not realizing Stolitz is actually looking for more. With all their previous interactions showing a small level of disregard that could easily be seen as mocking or flexing a power differential. And it happens because Stolitz believes that they are equals, and believes that all this teasing is in good fun. But he fails to ever properly convey that they are equals part to Blitz, so instead he felt like a lesser. Stolitz is trying to be cutesy in a way that would imply my man, instead it comes off as my pet.
My darling Blitzy!
Just say my name right, fucking dick.
I think one could make the argument that Stolitz's social naivete could make the more experienced Blitz the one with the real power in this relationship, but the nature of class and hell in that book permanently puts the power in Stolitz's hands whether he wants to admit it or not. So he, therefore, needs to hold himself and be held to a higher standard, as he can walk away from this deal with emotional scars and hurt feelings, but Blitz will be left in poverty. No one here is the bad guy, but the onus is on Stolitz to be clear about what he wants his relationship to be and to change it, and for him to live up to the idea that he's learned from his mistakes and to act accordingly. Which finally brings us to Full Moon, and the absolute comedy of errors that was Stolitz's plan and his execution.
Congratulations. You played yourself.
So let's start off by talking about Stolitz's mental state going into Full Moon. He's about to have a mental breakdown. Dude woke up, realized what day it was, and vomited all over the floor. Which, if you told me he drank himself to sleep that night, I would buy it. But the distinct lack of bottles around him tells me that the intended idea is that he saw what day it was and was just so nervous he threw up. Stolitz is trying to put on a brave face, but the man is panicking, freaking out about how he needs to be brave enough to confess, whipping between fake confidence and despair as he tries to tell himself that everything is going to be okay, that he'll just see Blitz and it'll be easy unless it isn't. Dude is climbing into refrigerator levels of dramatic right now, and we will be coming back to this shot. But this whole opening sequence highlights just the very different pages he and Blitz are on right now. Stolitz is terrified how this night will change everything. Well, for Blitz, this is the first time they've hooked up since Aussie's, so he's excited to return to what he thinks is normal. This scene, though, also hints just the main reason that Stolitz isn't prepared for tonight, and therefore won't be able to adapt when things go off script. And also the script wasn't that good to begin with the biggest one being that Stolitz hasn't learned a damn thing.
I swore I wouldn't dwell on the divorce.
Stolitz becoming aware of the messed up nature of their relationship and finally addressing it is a good first couple of steps. But Stolitz, my guy, you poor sweet whoopee, you're still making the same mistakes. Stolitz is still using Blitz as a crutch for his personal and familial issues. He was in a loveless, minimum, emotionally abusive marriage. He was sleepwalking through life. Then Blitz accidentally made him feel alive again for the second time, and he then would proceed to declare he was going to get a divorce from his wife, only to drag his feet while still publicly cheating on her and using his daughter as an excuse to get out of the house. His relationship with Blitz blinded him to everything else around him. Blitz was Stolitz's escape, and even this late in the game, he's still using Blitz as one. He's looking to Blitz to love him as his self-esteem is in shambles. And I feel like it's very telling that the two bubbles only reflect himself rather than some symbolic, oh, there's Blitz and Stolitz coming together. But no, it's always just him. Just like pre-Aussies, he wants Blitz to love him as part of him needs this relationship to work to validate his choice to pursue it, that he wasn't a fool. All the same pressure and feelings that made him hide his face at Aussies are still firmly here and are now firmly wrapping themselves around Blitz's response. Stolitz is insecure, and while he loves Blitz for awakening him to life, the subtext reveals just how much he's still basing his self-worth on Blitz's opinion. Stolitz is imagining this confession is going to solve all of his problems, when really, he's still a hot mess that hasn't fixed any of his underlying issues. Same can be said for Blitz's self-hatred and his inability to imagine somebody loving him. They are both massively flawed individuals. They both need to overcome and deal with these things before they can even consider dating, as while it'd be nice if they hooked up, it wouldn't couldn't fix things. Only they themselves can do that. Also, Stolitz' lack of self-confidence while sympathetic is one of the prime reasons that he's set himself up to fail, as Stolitz needed to have done one thing and he could have nipped the Blitz thought he was joking card in the bud. Stolitz needed to give Blitz a heads up. He needed to let Blitz know that something was going to be different and it was going to be about something other than sex. That way there's less chance of misunderstanding and Stolitz isn't ambushing Blitz with a confession he wasn't mentally prepared to have. Blitz comes into this night thinking that he's just gonna bone. He spends all day prepping for it. Then he has to switch gears multiple times as Stolitz fails to get to his point, leaving Blitz floundering like, what's going on? So if Stolitz wanted things to go well, he needed to give just a little heads up and not drop this massive bomb just out of the blue. And ideally, Stolitz need to have this whole convo occur on any night besides the full moon. Blitz is coming in with false expectations that Stolitz set is based on actual precedents, which is a degree worse than Blitz just inviting Stolitz to Aussie's, as Blitz just was gonna waste his time and not try and change the very nature of their relationship. And I already know what some people are typing, that Stolitz was nervous. Blitz was evading Stolitz's questions. He needed to use the full moon as that was the only night he could get Blitz to come, which I hear you, that makes sense. However, based on the text messages and how the story has portrayed them, I also kind of disagree, as based on the evidence and what the story has actually shown us of these two working together in season 2, evading might be too strong of a word.
Sorry, it's a bad time yet again, Blitzy, but I seem to have found myself in a bit of a sitch.
Like, look at the text messages from the previous time Stolitz tried to stealth get Blitz to come over to his place. If you take out the whatevs at the top, Blitz isn't so much going out of his way to dodge Stolitz's questions, it's that most of the time, Stolitz doesn't have any follow-up and that he immediately backs down. Stolitz asks, do you want to talk? Blitz asks why. Stolitz proceeds to do an about face and backpedal into giving Blitz an out, saying if he wants. Stolitz says if you don't feel up for it, you don't have to come, so Blitz takes it. Stolitz tries to pick a different date to meet up and chat. Blitz says he might be busy. Then Stolitz doesn't ask, cool, what date works for you? He gives Blitz another out. He leaves the question of when should they meet up just lying there dead on the floor as he doesn't want to push for it, leaving Stolitz just be sitting at home praying that Blitz will text him back. Blitz is trying to engage with Stolitz as little as possible, which makes it ironic when he starts panicking at the idea put forward by Luna that Stolitz is losing interest in him based on their lack of meetups, when he's the one putting in the least amount of effort. He's partially at fault for all this, we won't deny it, but this also just speaks to the need for Stolitz to be direct when it comes to Blitz, as Blitz is an idiot who isn't picking up what Stolitz is putting down. If Stolitz wants his relationship to evolve or change, he needs to be clear. Blitz's behavior would be a lot more shitty if they were in an actual relationship, but based on the rules that they have set for themselves, he's technically honoring all of them and is under no obligation to text Stolitz back. And Blitz never actually ghosts Stolitz. He doesn't stop taking his calls. He still shows a willingness to meet up if Stolitz requests it. So Stolitz basically just need to put his foot down, say we need to talk, or if that's too much for him, just text Blitz before they meet up at the full moon, hey, leave the book at home, there's something else we need to discuss. But he doesn't, as Stolitz is afraid of conflict. He's overcorrecting from before and now trying to avoid anything that might register as a command. Blitz wants to get back to the way things used to be, when they were just trading favors for favors, as that's a world Blitz understands. It's his life, everything's fine, and if it's not, shut up, yes it is. Their situation is sad for a lot of reasons, as they both desperately want to be loved. But if we base things on what the characters are actually thinking and how they perceive their relationships, Stolitz, as the one who wants to initiate change and who supposedly wants to show Blitz just how much he respects him and views him as an equal, Stolitz then, to me, does a lot more worthy of critique in this situation, as he's the one who created it, and then didn't warn the person he was supposedly trying to show he cared and respected. He knows that Blitz has massive emotional walls. He saw how hurt he got at Aussie's and how he pushed him away. This also mirrors Blitz's own moment of recognition that the other person that he supposedly liked wasn't in fact invulnerable and could be actually hurt. Stolitz knows enough about Blitz to realize that springing this whole choice on him might not be the best option, but Stolitz being too nervous to be fully proactive and considerate of how this might affect the person he's trying to win over. Instead, Stolitz backs himself into a corner and did his whole confession this way because it was the best he could do, not what was best for Blitz. And it's that lack of consideration, failure to register just how his plans and actions might affect Blitz, and that really cements me just how not ready Stolitz is to be in this relationship. That even after seeing how his actions have negative consequences, even if unintentional, he then fails to properly unpack his behavior, leaving him doomed to repeat it. He recognized that the dynamic he created, this transaction of sex for the book, it's wrong. He can never be sure Blitz truly loves him when for Blitz, keeping Stolitz happy is necessary for his business. Stolitz himself says as much.
He's only here as a prisoner. What kind of monster does that make me?
In spite of saying he gets it, he ends up making all the same mistakes later, validating Blitz's own words. Stolitz says he'll let Blitz choose, only to walk away after his heart was ripped in half when Blitz thought he was joking, refusing to listen, then dismissing him out of his house without ever letting Blitz make an actual choice. This is what makes Stolitz a hypocrite, just like him making excuses about Blitz making things all about sex when he's the one who made them that way.
Favors
In. Get it all the way. Get it all the way.
Though, to cop to something that I got wrong in my review of this episode, as, yeah, we all make mistakes, I expressed my frustration with Stolitz setting up this whole situation and then refusing to actually talk with Blitz about any of it, which in hindsight I realized I was kind of wrong about, as Stolitz didn't actually plan a conversation.
I'll set us free, set us free. He deserves the choice to stay or go.
Stolitz, grand, socially inexperienced, romantic, probably autistic person that he is, didn't actually go into tonight planning to talk things out. If he did, he might have been at least semi-emotionally prepared for things to not go according to plan and have discussion about where they want things to go. Instead, what Stolitz cooked up was this grand, romantic gesture, where he would recite a probably pre-written speech, which, that's fine and actually helpful in a lot of cases. But what's not helpful is that Stolitz's plan is distinctly framed in his own song as being a basically yes or no question. He's not saying we'll talk about what we want to be, he's saying he'll free him and he'll die if this doesn't go well. This, on top of the surprise nature of the proposal, is another case of how, in spite of Stolitz having just the best of intentions of saying he made a mistake in the past, that the power dynamic was wrong, he still keeps putting himself in a position of power by creating and controlling the circumstances in which Blitz and he interact. Stolitz was the one who decided what was going to happen that night. Stolitz decided when Blitz had given his answer, and Stolitz was the one who got to decide when the night was over. For a guy who starts singing about how he'll give Blitz a choice, he sure didn't let Blitz make any. Because Stolitz only understands that he was wrong, but still hasn't changed his behavior in relation to this still present power imbalance. This is why, for as great as this line is,
Think so very highly of you. I didn't realize you think so low of me.
again, perfect line, it however still points to Stolitz continuing to fail to grasp just his own position in relation to Blitz. That while it's a nice sentiment that he's never thought of Blitz as being beneath him, that doesn't change the fact that since the first time they've met, Blitz was bought by Stolitz's father as a toy for him. Stolitz's wealth and privilege allows him to avoid the reality that Blitz is forced to live in. Far from this being a cute, oh, they're from two different worlds narrative, Stolitz is very cognizant of the underlying social conditioning that these environments breeds, so they can't ever truly be together unless they talk. They have to discuss how they feel, how they did each other wrong, the joys, the failings, and figure out just where they want to go from there. But having a discussion isn't what Stolitz actually planned and did. In fact, the only one he ever really planned on talking was himself, with Blitz then getting to make his decision. Or at least that's how things worked out in execution. Like the plan, it's shoddy, it plays into a lot of things that Stolitz, God bless him, that he is still guilty for, but the actual execution is similarly rough. As after not telling Blitz what to expect, the first thing he does is to ignore Blitz's attempts to hype up the night and just jump straight to asking for his book back. His tone is more serious than usual, tipping off Blitz that something is off with Stolitz, and then he says this will be permanent. This is why I said Stolitz probably should have told Blitz to leave the book at home, as Blitz goes straight into bargaining, trying to prove that he has value via sex. But Stolitz, to his credit, doesn't give in to temptation, but then to put himself back in the negative, he gets up.
No need. I've made up my mind.
Making the long walk to his bookcase where the crystal is sandwiched between the books they play with as children, which is a cute, sentimental touch, doesn't change the fact that Blitz is right behind him begging for Stolitz not to take this from him, that he'll lose everything and is willing to give anything. Only for Stolitz not to tell Blitz don't worry, things will be fine. Instead, he goes right into an info dump about what an osmodium crystal is and how he's off the hook for their deal. Now, if you're keeping track at home, Blitz's understanding of what the fuck is going on here has shifted at minimum 6 different times in 85 seconds. This is a lot, and a testament to Stolitz poorly playing the speech out, as the way he started had Blitz in crisis mode immediately. There's no ease in, and boils down to Stolitz saying, I've made a decision, and this will radically change your life. But not really. I do generally feel bad for the both of them, but mainly Blitz, as he's the one getting taken for a ride. Stolitz, he's doing his best, that's why he is rushing into these things. But again, consequences, negative impact. With this revelation that the deal is over and that he has a crystal just getting dropped in his lap, and Blitz of course finds a way to blame himself for this.
Because I can always do better.
Blitz essentially has been trapped in a perpetual state of reaction this entire time. Dude is at the mercy of Stolitz's paragraph structure. Though I think I know what Stolitz Stolitz was going for here. I think Stolitz wanted to build to this grand romantic conclusion, to tug at Blitz's heartstrings as he explained just what this crystal is, how Blitz is free, he cares about Blitz, and that he was wrong for what they were, and that Stolitz loves him for him. Please stay with me. Which, honestly, everything after Stolitz kneels down is solid. The problem is just how Stolitz ordered this monologue, as he wanted to have the crystal reveal, he wanted to have that big finish. He figured he had to deal with the book situation first, but rather than letting Blitz feel secure by holding onto the book as he explained all of this, Stolitz, in his rush to act before losing his nerve, basically fell back on a checklist of get back book, give crystal, give speech, which, I get it, nervous, but this order of events had Blitz in tears before he ever got to the good parts. And when he's finally in recovery and he finally has the crystal, his gut reaction is like, wait, did I do something wrong? Might point to the fact that he doesn't want to lose Stolitz. The sense of desperation might honestly come from something deeper, that he has this fear of being cast aside, but this also goes to show just how Blitz is still 2 steps back on begging/bargaining. As Blitz has spent the entire day thinking Stolitz was getting bored of him because of the writer's, Luna's suggestion, so his mind all day has just been on physically pleasuring Stolitz. As far as he's concerned, that's all this is and all there ever be after Aussie's. With Stolitz's fear of confrontation making the texting a case of begging for Blitz to pick up on subtext when the imp can barely text. So yeah, this whole sequence, it's a lot, it would throw anybody, and Blitz is a self-hating idiot for thinking that this was foreplay.
Okay, alright, you're fucking with me. This is a...
Watch this, Lise. You can actually pinpoint the second when his heart rips in half.
Blitz doesn't think he can be loved, was in denial about how Stolitz felt, and this is still a yikes for me. I'm not surprised that Stolitz reacts the way he does. However, while sad, this situation, this night, it is Stolitz's masterpiece. There are dozens of different ways he could have gone about this, but didn't as a result of his own insecurities, fears, and a lack of understanding of just who Blitz is as a person. Stolitz isn't responsible for changing Blitz, but Stolitz's whole arc across the series has been a showcase in how he gets wrapped up in his own emotions and then fails to notice how his actions affect others. He's had his entire life planned out for him, and he's never really had a chance to make his own decisions. So you understand why he's so bad at this. But when he keeps repeating the same behavior, creates a situation that hurt himself and others, my sympathy meter starts to bottom out, as after a point, this shit is just on you and you have to be better. And there's no better encapsulation of Stolitz's lack of change and his still weird relationship with imps than this shot.
I'll fucking die alone if this goes bad!
Now, I'm pretty sure this shot is mostly meant to be a joke like a certain other one in the montage, but it's such a succinct example of just Stolitz's attitude towards imps that I feel like I have to mention it. As Stolitz is a mess in the morning, worried about how things will go with Blitz, he hates all this waiting, he's freaking out, and this all builds to the point where he's hiding himself in a refrigerator, which is hilarious. But here's the thing. That fridge wasn't empty. You can see its contents all over the floor of the kitchen, meaning that he ripped the fridge open and threw its contents all over the floor to make room for himself, because he's just so worried and nervous about how things are going to go, meaning that Stolitz either doesn't register or worse, doesn't care that his imp servant standing right next to him will be the one who has to clean up this mess when he's done freaking out. Stolitz is not as rants or sadistically cruel to the imp servants like Stella is, but Stolitz isn't necessarily kind to them either. With this imp in particular, who we don't have a name for, but fans are calling him Pringles, which he's a snack, so I think it's cute. But Pringles here was chucked at Stolitz's head and given what looks like a concussion. But Stolitz never bothered to check if they're okay, and said just taking for granted or natural that the imp picks themselves up and goes back to serving him by holding his phone. We even see in season 2, Stolitz squeezes the life out of this little guy as Stolitz was getting heated at his wife as he forgot that there was a fully sentient person in his hand. This imp is being used as a stress toy and suffering the consequences of Stolitz's inability to control himself or register the feelings of those around him, even though Stolitz was most likely raised by imp servants. But despite that, despite being outcast amongst the Goetia, his servants still live in fear of him. Stolitz's inability to register his own privilege and power and the effect he has on others is why I can't really fault Blitz for saying the mean things that he said, as whether Stolitz wants to admit or not, all these accusations have an element of truth to them, even if it is blown out of proportion by Blitz's own lived experience and self-hatred issues.
Spring this feelings bullshit on me. Everything you put me through, you pompous, rich asshole!
Ignorance is an explanation, not an excuse. But it's even worse when you've been confronted by this issue, you've realized what you've been doing wrong, only to then continue to make the same mistakes. Stolitz being insecure, inexperienced, and heartbroken makes him sympathetic, not right. People have been coming out with lots of explanations for why Stolitz acted the way he did after Blitz misunderstood what was going on. And while I agree with some of them, others felt like there are massive reaches to justify Stolitz's actions as being the only morally correct reaction to what happened. with one of the biggest being the mere fact that Blitz yelling meant that Stolitz was under no obligation to listen to what was being said and therefore was vowed to disengage with the situation, which Stolitz planned tonight. He didn't plan on having a conversation or shouting match, and I think it's very in character for him to avoid conflict like this. But I think it's a little bit iffy to suggest that Blitz's tone invalidates the accurate points he is making, especially when Blitz doesn't actually start out yelling. He actually starts with just a clarification.
Wait, what? You were serious? Oh, hold on now, Stolitz. What the fuck?
Which Stolitz replies by leaving the room and proceeds to start making excuses in a moment that, again, even the creator agrees Stolitz is coping, not recognizing the reality of the situation. So Blitz, far from his usual overreacting self, actually ends up feeling like a guy having a normal reaction to hear what is effectively a lie and being ignored. So while not pretty and not great and not helpful in the slightest, him yelling and demanding time to think and calling Blitz out for his bull is the least surprising thing in the world, and feels like it would have happened regardless if he didn't have internalized self-hatred and issues with being dismissed and thrown away. Also, the situation gives a little bit of civility politics, but because of how they said, their whole opinion is considered invalid. The other excuse that I've heard that I'm like, yeah, but not really, is that Blitz's yelling and kicking open the door triggered Stolitz due to his history of being abused by Stella, which gets into a sticky topic of DV. Which, first off, I don't think those who have a history with these issues aren't fully valid in sympathizing with Stolitz, as to see a familiar pattern play out then suggest Stolitz is having a similar trauma response, that's understandable. However, the actual text of the show doesn't really make a strong case that Blitz's actions being like Stella's is what caused Stolitz to shut down, or that Stolitz's reaction to Stella is to actually freeze up and shut down in the first place. Of all the scenes we've seen of Stella and Stolitz together, it's clear that Stella has always been emotionally abusive towards Stolitz, calling him STOLAS, humiliating him in public and mocking him for all of his perceived faults, with Stolitz just taking all of it. But it's portrayed less as him reactively shutting down, and more like an active choice he was making to protect the home life he's built for Octavia. He's not freezing up, he is seething at the disrespect being thrown his way, rolling his eyes through her insults and draining to power through a party he hates. Stolitz is Stella's victim, but at the moment, any examples of physical violence comes just after Stolitz's affair, with her chucking imps and plants at him, with that being treated as a joke. With the one time she's actually swung at him, ending with him catching her arm and announcing that their divorce will go through. I've seen people say Stolitz backing up when Stella is clearly mad and moving towards him, or the fact that he was able to catch Stella's hand is a sign that all this is practiced behavior, that this incident reveals that others have happened in the past. Which I'm not saying that those things haven't happened in the past, but at the moment we have no evidence of it, or that Stolitz's usual response being to shut down. Sometimes you just back up when someone is clearly about to take a swing at you. Though yes, we do have that other incident where Stolitz was making appeasements as he's trying to calm Stella down as she was freaking shit out and throwing imps. But as soon as she's gone, he just sighed in a clear spate of exhaustion, but it's more of a sign he's just over this shit than anything else. When we see Stella yelling, half the time we see Stolitz fighting back. And if you want the clearest example of Stolitz not giving a fuck about Stella's yelling, take the fact that he finds it so commonplace and so untriggering that even when she's screaming right in front of him planning a hit, he just tunes it out. That's how little he cares about Stella's yelling and her tantrums. He's so used to it that it's become background noise. So saying Blitz yelling and kicking open a door caused Stolitz to shut down because of his history with Stella feels like something that could almost be a thing, but within the context of the show, it doesn't fully track. When the more accurate explanation is that Stolitz is conflict avoidant by nature. Ever since he was a kid, he's basically just been used as a prop. He's never really stood up for himself. He's never really fought back or pushed. That's how he's raised. He has the anxiety. He just got emotionally shattered 30 seconds before. I don't think Stolitz is having this reaction because Blitz reminds him of Stella. He's having this reaction because this is Blitz, and he just broke his heart, and he is on the verge of crying and just can't handle this conversation, which is still sympathetic and understandable, but it's a less defensive position than Stolitz having a trauma response. I legit have people saying that Blitz's rant at the end constitutes threatening violence. So Stolitz was therefore completely in the right to not engage with him for that reason, despite the fact that he is 20 feet away and is weighing on Stolitz's response after saying,
"Well, I'm not letting you, bitch! Let's go!"
Which again, I'm not saying invalidates or insults those who had that reaction to the episode. I think the text of the show isn't pushing to us that Blitz is threatening violence or yelling being the thing that causes Stolitz to shut down. It's the fact that Blitz's accurate rant hits too close to home, shattering the romantic ideal that he had built up in his head, and the fact that it came from the person he loved most and just bore his soul to, and the fact that he's heard all this before from Stryker.
With our feelings because we're smaller and not as important!
Don't get to talk over me. I don't have to listen to your bullshit.
Yeah, back when Stolitz was being held hostage by Stryker and being threatened with violence, where in response Stolitz mocked his tormentor and made dick jokes, Stryker ran at Stolitz calling him a pompous royal who took advantage and looked down upon imps. Stolitz tries to deny this, only for Stryker to start torturing him, taking glee in the act. He is thankfully saved, but Stolitz still hasn't recovered from these injuries, and yeah, he nearly died. He held out hope that Blitz would save him, but Blitz was busy and didn't take the situation as seriously as he believed that Stolitz would just be fine. But Stolitz's ideas and perception of himself were damaged by this encounter with Stryker, further ingraining the idea that Blitz might resent him and see him as some royal asshole, a status that he has never prescribed to himself, as yeah, he is generally better than most of the other ones we've seen, though being better than Stella is not really that much of an achievement. But the idea that he might be seen this way, that Blitz might see him this way, only ratcheted up Stolitz's fears for the night. So hearing Blitz say this is the worst thing he could have said, but that doesn't discount the fact that Stolitz's actions have unintentionally validated every single word of it. So him turning around and saying, "I thought so highly of you," and while sad and carries a sweet idea, it underpins Stolitz's inability to grapple with the actual reality of his and Blitz's situation. He knows what he did was wrong, but only on a surface level. Else he would have had an actual conversation where they talk about what's going on rather than some grand proposal. Because Stolitz was afraid of conflict, and he decided that this was the best way to go for him. I like the idea that Stolitz was trying to exit the situation gracefully by leaving after he assumed he had his answer. I like that all of his paintings outside of his bedroom have mushed out his face, as on the surface level he's fine, but just like Blitz, he also hates himself. I like the idea that Stolitz was trying to exit gracefully to not make Blitz feel guilty after he assumed he had his answer. I think that's what he kind of thought he was doing, but the nobility of that idea starts to fall apart when he walks away and starts making excuses and acting aghast that Blitz would think that this would all be about sex. Stolitz's reaction is valid, even if it leads him to making all the wrong choices and trying to date Blitz. But the fact that he created this specific situation with so many little elements that show, while it's a nice step forward that he is trying and being direct, a lot of it still shows just how much Stolitz hasn't really dealt with his personal issues that have plagued him since the start of the series, which is a statement that equally applies to Blitz. But Blitz isn't the one thinking about how he'll change things or came in knowing what was actually gonna happen. So while Blitz isn't blameless in the slightest, I feel like this is a case of a leopard ate my face, with the circumstances being of Stolitz's design, and I'm so fucked for this video. I'm not trying to victim blame Stolitz, not saying it isn't a good thing to not engage with a person who is screaming at you. But in the fictional story that Hell of a Boss has created, every aspect of this night highlights that Stolitz set himself up to fail in trying to date Blitz. As he's scared, he's nervous, and he's chasing a fantasy that makes him miss the reality that's right in front of him. That Blitz, for all his harsh words and basically demanding a screaming match, was trying to actually talk about their relationship. This isn't Aussie's where they both got emotionally jumped, leaving them too raw to have any convo. Stolitz went about things in a sweet way that sounds great on paper, but in practice and in context, how he did it and who he did it to, it shows that continued lack of self-awareness on his part, which might be forgivable if the story didn't make clear that this is something that he is consistently failing at, despite all the times he's called out for it. And the worst, and I do mean the worst excuse that I keep seeing pop up, the grand explanation that tries to soften the blow about how quickly Stolitz reacted and broke down in this event, and how it's all because of those stupid fucking pills.
Change things. I'll just bring the rope and spikes. Oh God, we've got a nice.
That's it?
Disclosure, being out of any antidepressant can seriously fuck with your emotional well-being. They can cause mood swings and make someone more likely to be emotionally overwhelmed in stressful times. I should know, I'm on them, but real-world logic aside, I cannot think of a less narratively satisfying answer to why Stolitz acted the way he did to justify how he acted outside of all the other reasons that he's being overwhelmed just in general, than by saying that this is because he didn't take his meds. I'm not always right in my analysis or takes. You guys know that I'm a fuck up, but I think I'm mostly on the ball when determining when Hell of a Boss as a show wants us to take something seriously versus when to take it as a joke, or a joke that should be taken seriously in hindsight. Hell of a Boss wasn't having Luna beat Blitz into the ground to say something about child-on-parent attacks. It was doing it cause funny and over the top. So us getting a less than second shot of Stolitz being out of meds doesn't feel like it's meant to be the smoking gun that absolves Stolitz or explain away the behavior he's been exhibiting since he woke up. This man is a mess. He's freaking out. Everything is riding on this thing. He is denying all the other problems in his life to focus on Blitz, and that is enough. The fact that he got his heart broken by Blitz, yeah, you understand why he just doesn't want to have this conversation, because he wasn't ready for it, that he can't handle it. And the story could have played out exactly the same even if it implied that he was still taking his medication. Whenever people bring up the meds, it gives me missing episode flashbacks, where I had people swearing that Blitz and Stolitz talked after Aussies in the missing episode that turned out to just be the Kesha one. This was used to explain why they didn't have a single moment of awkwardness together when we saw them interact in episode 2 of season 2, which occurred right after the nuclear option that was Aussies. Or how people said the big difference here was that Stolitz was being more respectful of Blitz and his boundaries because he didn't use the pet name Blitzy, which I low-key believed in, only for Stolitz to use it again in episode 4.
I'm sorry it's a bad time yet again, Blitzy, but
I do not think out of all things, Stolitz being out of meds is supposed to be this big smoking gun. I don't think it was meant to be taken that seriously. And I say this as someone who has taken this ship and its interactions so seriously for like the runtime of this video. Stolitz being out of meds is more emblematic of Stolitz's frantic and cornered mental state. And if we are supposed to take it seriously, I counter that while understandable that he would lose track of his meds given the situation of the divorce and Blitz, it also provides more evidence of Stolitz just his failure to take care of himself. So him being out of meds would still be on him. As Stolitz is rich, he has the wealth and connection to get Crystal to the human world and legitimize Blitz's business. He can teleport anywhere he wants, even without the book. He has servants that he can say a word to and have them fetch him more. There are so many ways Stolitz could have handled this, but he didn't. I love Stolitz as a character. The man is a mess, and I sympathize with how he's just been fucked by life and trying his best. I feel like parts of the fandom infantilize and make Stolitz out to be just this perfect, tragic whoopee, when he is a grown man in his mid-30s. The story keeps saying he needs to take responsibility for his own actions and to be more aware of how he affects others. Instead, the defense is that he was out of meds, Blitz was acting like Stella, and his feelings were hurt. While I respect that he's trying, picking apart his actions/plans reveal sympathetic and understandable motivations, but he's still failing to correct his own behavior, and the fact that he can fall back on his powers and privilege to shut out Blitz means he needs to be held and hold himself to a higher standard if he wants this relationship to work. If he doesn't want it, cool, that's fine. But he also has to cop to the fact that Blitz did have to take the deal to keep his business going. And transactional is how Blitz views all of his relationships, even with the rest of him. Blitz thinks he has to give his friends something to justify himself being in their lives, so he created Imp. Blitz has massive things he needs to work on. He is not innocent by any means. The full moon was, to me, primarily a showcase of Stolitz's failings in this relationship, which is sad as at the end of the night, the biggest victim of Stolitz's actions was himself. Blitz realized he was too harsh, that Stolitz does care for him, but he also doesn't end the night heartbroken. He ended it yelling about what the hell just happened. The ball is meant to be in Blitz's court, but unless they both work on themselves first and Stolitz really stops saying just how he'll change and finally takes ownership of his actions rather than admitting to them then not altering them. Until that happens, this ship might really be doomed, or worse, only some of the mistakes will be acknowledged, while others will be ignored for a more sappy ending. I'm curious to see where the story will take them next, what lessons the characters will be made to learn, and what's going to be swept under the rug for shenanigans, but I've hung on this long, and despite everything I've said and what you might think, I still ship it.